Hey everybody, today we're going to be looking at the teardown, inspection, maintenance, and reassembly of the classic Coleman 2-burner white gas stove. On this one, off to the left-hand side, we can see stamped on the case 425E is the model. Now this might be something you found in your basement or picked up at a yard sale or put away for an extended amount of time. You want to check it, make sure it's working, or clean it out so it works at optimum performance. So we're going to tear into one of these. Let's get started. Externally, you can see that this stove is used. It's not a museum piece. As such, it's not clean. It's got rust spots. Structurally, it should be sound. There shouldn't be pieces hanging off of it. Some pieces may need to be riveted back on. If they're loose, that's obvious, but a quick inspection should be done on all parts to make sure that they are intact and functioning properly, like these clasps and handles and what have you. We'll start by raising the grill to gain access to the fuel tank. And we're going to pull this tank. We're going to deal with this later as a separate unit. And here's what happens when you store stuff in a garage in Florida. Here's a mud dauber nest. So we'll remove that. We're going to clean this area out later. So I'm going to lower the grill back down. Now I'm going to close both of these wind guards. Just get these out of the way. The unit is carefully propped up, facing up with its cover open, exposing the bottom, where we see one Phillips screw, as well as two holes, each with a nut in the recess. We'll break tension on each nut using a 7/16 socket. Break tension on the Phillips screw, and then keep turning it. We'll hear the clip in the back fall inside as we remove it completely from the unit. Lowering the case back down, we'll pull that clip out, put it off to the side. We'll keep it roughly in this position to gain access to the bottom to remove those two nuts. The left burner adjustment should be perpendicular to the slot as shown. At this point, the whole burner assembly is brought to the right and up such that the burner adjustment is brought through the slot and the whole burner assembly is now removed. So I'm just going to close up everything right quick, just so I have room to work on the next step. On each side is two Phillips screws. I'm going to remove those two screws now. Opening the case back up with the screws removed, I simply remove the burner mounting plate from the unit. On the underside of the plate, I can see more mud dauber nests. We're going to bring both these pieces now out to the garage area for cleaning. Everything here is simply getting blasted with the hose. A degreaser could also be used. It could also be scrubbed if necessary, depending on how dirty everything is. I give everything a head start, drying it with air before I let it air dry overnight. If things need to be prepped and painted, a heat-resistant paint like a barbecue paint should be used. A black heat-resistant paint was already used for this one. For the outer case, there are many debates online as to what's the most appropriate paint to use for that. Next, we're going to work on the burner. This is all going to need to be blown out, and the burners need to be disassembled. And this is done with a fitted screwdriver. This may require some penetrating oil if it's never been done before, spraying some of that penetrating oil and letting it sit, maybe even a couple of days if necessary. I give this one a quick tap. We can see some crap coming out onto the towel here. I open the valve on the opposite end, and we can see that it's a very simple design. Fully open. There's no need to remove this, unless we find some weird obstruction later. Air will now be blown through in all directions. Also attempting to cover up holes so air will be rechanneled into other directions to remove as much dirt from different areas as possible. If there was any evidence of significant impaction or mud dauber nests, water and soap will be used, followed by drying out with air. Everything is then given a quick wipe down, remove any soot, debris before bringing back into the house. Now I'll be working on the individual burners. We'll remove everything in order, flipping it upside down, beginning with the screw and the top plate. Then we'll proceed to these individual elements. As you can see, half of them are stuck together. then the bottom plate, then the base. I'm using a brass brush. We're just trying to clean this up, knock off surface rust. We're not trying to take off any of the plating that doesn't need removal. You could use a Dremel with a brass brush if you want. I found that by hand is sufficient. I'm also cleaning it up here on the bench, though I'm going to be washing it later. This is just for the purpose of seeing this on camera as I do it. I also have the items here to replate this stuff, should I choose, but I don't feel any of these parts actually warrant it. And we can see that brass brush is doing a good job to clean up these parts. Moving on to these individual elements, we can see that they're rusted together. Very gentle bending. Turning around, bending on the other side. Separates them, no problem at all. We can see they're separated now. These are actually 3 pieces. So we can put them off to the side. We can see these are actually 2 pieces, so these will be very gently bent. As little bending as possible to allow them to separate, and then they'll be peeled apart and individually cleaned. Either have flat rings or serrated rings. This is a flat one, so we're just going to clean it here on the table. Cleans up nice with all the surface rust removed. This is one of the serrated rings. I brush this one using outward strokes. And these clean up nicely too. Once all the parts have had the rust removed, they'll be washed. And then they'll be dried. The bottom plate bows in the upward position, and it shows that the first element will be corrugated from the witness marks. We'll lower this back onto the right side burner and just give it a couple turns on the screw just to get some of the slack out. That's all. From the bottom we see it centers in the notch. So from the top, with enough slack to have a slight drag, we grab all the elements and give them a twist back and forth, allowing them to all come into center so that they're all aligned. Now it looks just like that, everything perfectly centered and aligned. Holding everything in position, we snug down the screw. Inspecting the work closely, we see that everything is aligned, everything is in the correct order. Everything is nice and clean now. This burner is ready to go. The exact same procedure will be repeated on the left-hand burner now. This was actually put in upside down the last time I installed it, but I hadn't used the auxiliary burner since then, so I hadn't noticed. These rings are smaller than that of the primary burner. All cleaned up, ready for assembly. Again, twisting it back and forth, center everything as I bring in the slack from the screw. Still keeping just enough slack to be able to turn everything back and forth again, to recenter everything, inspect that everything's centered. Come back one more time to snug down the screw a last time. And this burner would be finished. And with that, this whole burner assembly is done. It can be put off to the side until later. We'll now move on to the tank and the associated hardware. I'd first like to inspect this tank for any major holes, damage, deep rust pitting. It's a pressurized tank that's holding fuel near a fire. If you have any holes in this thing, it's a non-starter. It's not worth it. You can't repair it. You're just going to have to replace the tank itself. This is just surface rust on here. It could probably benefit from being painted, but there are no hazards. Looking by the cap, of course, is an inspection point. We're going to unscrew that cap now and take a look under that. A visual inspection shows it to be in good condition, though we're going to find out in a bit. Then we have our pump assembly, along with our fuel metering, delivery, and generator. Going to hit the seal with just a little bit of rem oil and drop it right back on for some quick tests. We're going to do some evaluations before we do anything else to this unit. So I'll make sure that the fuel valve is completely closed. We're going to bring the pump to the open position, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to pump it up a few times just to pressurize the tank ever so slightly. Close it. As I slowly open up the cap, we can hear the air hiss out. The tank is pressurized, and this shows us that the pump is working. If the pump is not working, pull the pump all the way up. Apply several drops of 3-in-1 oil through this hole right here. Wait a while, and then try again. We're going to pump it up again. And close it. Now I'm going to check it from the fuel valve. And this shows us there's no obstruction in the lower feed of the fuel tank. Bring the warm-up lever now to the top position. Now I'm going to repressurize the tank. Again, as I open up the valve, the air flows. I know there's no obstruction on the top port of the pickup tube. Having passed these diagnostics, I'll start disassembly for cleaning. So I'll remove the gas cap again. There's a clip here that holds in the pump that can be pulled out with a pair of pliers. Gentle prying using a twisting method is shown from multiple locations will allow the pump to be released from the tank. Then slide the whole unit right out. We know this particular pump's in good condition from the diagnostic test. The recess with the check valve could benefit from some cleaning that we'll address later. On the fuel metering and delivery side, we're going to start disassembly. And we'll be breaking this all the way down as I'll be replacing the packing. So with the 7/16, be turning this nut, break tension. Then I could unscrew with my fingers and very gently pulling out this long needle as to not damage the end, which is very fragile. The packing in here is all but destroyed. With a 3/8 wrench, the next component will now be unscrewed. These items will all be inspected and cleaned. This could either be locked into the soft drawers of a vise, or I use a wrench if possible. Here I'm using a wrench. It's a pipe fit, so the more you loosen it, the easier it gets. Here we go, I've started a couple turns. The starting lever should be between the up and down position to provide adequate clearance. At this point, with the exception of the one-way valve, this tank is now ready for painting, cleaning, or whatever. We can see how the starting lever, when turned up, blocks fuel from the bottom of the tank, causing the system to use vapors from the hole at the top of the tank here. And the down position allows fuel to flow from the bottom of the tank. We separate these components with a 5/16 wrench, unscrewing by hand once loosened. Back to the valve, I'll grab the long needle firmly at the base with a pair of pliers while I spin the valve counterclockwise. We could see it unthreading, and now it's disconnected. This knob is missing a screw, which I'll have to replace, but I'm able to just pull it right off. On this particular type, you can't pull everything out the back because the knurled end is actually bigger in circumference than the nut as we see here. It's obstructed. So there's a retainer in the front right here, this round ring, which I'm going to have to remove so everything can be pulled forward. The retainer ring is only spread far enough as to be able to clear the ridge to remove it. Working it around, negotiating it to slide it off. Retainer sleeve is next, can be made accessible by pushing it down with the nut, slid over and removed. Then finally the nut brought down and removed from the unit, thus completing this disassembly. The nut is still filled with remnants of the old packing. We're going to remove that using a flathead screwdriver to break it up. The big chunks need to be removed. We can see that it's coming out. Keep working at this until all that's left is really debris on the sides. At this point, I'll finish it off with a .30 caliber brush, a bore brush. Spin that around to clean up the inner surfaces. And I'll keep doing this until all of the old graphite is removed. Finally, the nut is washed and evaluated for final inspection. Everything is cleared. This piece is cleaned and inspected for any damage on the shaft that may inhibit a liquid-tight seal. The retainer ring is also cleaned and inspected. As we remove it here from the paper towel, we can see that one side is beveled and one side is not. That's important to note. We'll also check the retainer clip for damage. And this is our breakdown of the tank components. Stop by Jason's today to work on the bike and powder coat the tank for preservation. This is because the tank is in good condition, but without the powder coating, that rust could become a problem and eventually ruin the integrity of the tank itself. So just to be sandblasted to a clean surface. This has all been sealed so none of the sand gets in. Blow everything away. Blow everything out inside the tank, including all the crap that was in there. I've got new caps on it for the actual powder coating. Everything cleaned with acetone. Nice.
Psych.
Yeah. Oh, look at that. Like factory. About 20 minutes on the cooling rack. And this thing looks good as new, but more important, it's protected against the elements and possible rust damage. We're back on the bench back home, so we're going to continue by pulling off all the caps for the dust. These threads are clear powder coat. The powder coat here is only up to the lip. In this area I left alone, it'll be cleaned up and the pump will cover it. I'm going to spray the check valve and the pump recess with some carb cleaner. Clean out all the stuff in there. And there was no shortage of crap to come out. So we hit it a couple of times. This was followed by canned air to ensure the inside was completely dried out. Then a couple hits with rem oil to lubricate everything. An inspection now inside shows everything to be nice and clean. We'll gently work the leather in so it fits inside. Working around in a circle. And once it's in, we'll slide everything down and lock it over the lip, checking that the holes are both lined up. We'll give the pump a couple goes. The retainer clip will be snapped back into place over the two holes. I'll tighten the fuel cap back on. Putting my finger over the remaining hole, I'm going to go and pump this up, maybe about 10 times, that's it. And then release my finger. Pump works, good. I did find a screw to replace this missing knob screw. I'm going to put this back off to the side now. This fuel pickup tube is going to be cleaned out with carb cleaner. This will be done from all directions, ensuring all debris is removed. And the same thing will be done with the main valve assembly, again from all directions. When I sprayed this part, you can see all the crap that came out onto my finger. As I continue on, getting all the stuff out of here. I blow everything out with canned air. The tube is then carefully reinserted and then snugged down with the wrench. We'll add some carb cleaner to a paper towel, cleaning this needle, only pulling in one direction as to not damage the needle at the end, being very careful as it's fragile. Also spin it a little at the end to clean it as shown. The spring is also cleaned using a brush to remove any large debris that may be on there, then spinning it through a paper towel to clean it. I checked down this tube for any debris. I could use some carb cleaner to clean it out. I could shake the spring in there to clean it out or use a 22 caliber bore brush, but looking through the paper towel, I see it's minor. So carb cleaner is going to be it to clean out this little tiny jet up front. I could see through with the light that it's good, so I'm going to put the spring back in. Moving on to the valve where the packing is going to be redone, it's important that this piece is absolutely clean with no debris on there. It's going to be a lot easier to put the components on, so I'm using polish to remove any foreign matter. I purchased the packing at oldcolemanparts. Note that mine is an E, so it uses the small valve stem packing. So first we're going to put the nut back on. There's not a lot of clearance, so it has to fit just right. This is followed by gently pushing the packing up. Then the retainer ring, the bevel end, will face outward as shown. This is followed by the retainer clip. That'll be pushed back up into the notch where it originally sat. Once in place, it'll be pressed back down with pliers. At this point, I'll place the knob back on the end. Put in the screw, and then tighten it down. The needle will then be screwed back onto this assembly. And then snugged down with pliers. On the valve body, I'll move this to the halfway position. The valve body is then screwed back into the tank by hand, about as far as it can get before requiring the assistance of a wrench to finish it off in the approximate position. The tube with the spring is then reinserted into the valve body, screwed in, again by hand, and finished off with the wrench snugged down. Using my finger as a guide, the needle is very carefully inserted back through this entire tube as to not damage the needle all the way to the end, where the nut is tightened down only by hand as far as it will go. At this point we see the valve body is not a full 90 degrees, so I just tweak it a little bit with that wrench, a minor adjustment, and I turn the valve all the way in. I very lightly scribe a couple marks on the top flat to record how many flats I'm going to turn this, because I'm going to give it just about one full turn here as I'm constantly measuring the resistance of the valve. Thereafter, I'm turning that knob, and I can see it's just starting to feel tension. It comes up on you quick, and I ended up, in fact, with 2 full turns for enough tension to tell me that packing is going to provide a liquid-tight seal. One more time, I'm going to pump up the tank again to do a test. We open up the tank, and we could hear the air coming out. There's no obstruction. Everything seems to be working fine. We can move on to the next step. So we're going to put the burner mounting tray back in. The higher side points towards the left for the mount. Line up the screw holes. We're going to put these sheet metal screws back through on both sides. We'll turn it around. Do the same thing. Then we're going to snug it down with the screwdriver. This slot over here on the left for the left burner, the high side of the mount points towards that slot. Here's the right side without the raise. The left side burner valve will go through that slot. The studs will be lined up, go through the mount. Bringing the sheet metal screw up first so I could get the clip on top of it and lock that down to secure this. Once tightened, this should be just enough to hold everything in place so we could put the 2 nuts on the bottom. Lock the unit so we could turn everything upright. Raising it up on an angle, we'll put the nuts into each hole to lock down the burners into place. Then we'll snug it with a ratchet and tighten the screw. This work is completed. The stove is ready for testing. So to conduct today's test, I'm going to fill this about halfway to the top with Coleman fuel. Can make sure the fuel valve is closed. Give this about 50 pumps. Turn the starting valve to the top position. Make sure the auxiliary burner is fully shut. Give it a little fuel with the lighter going. See, we get a nice blue flame. But when I turn down the position to the running position, we'll see that it's going to become erratic. A nice fire going, but in short order, as it heats up, you can watch these little blue wisps appear. It's become more regulated, more controlled, and we get our regular flame that we would expect to see on a running stove. First order of business, I want to make sure that the leak repair that I did works and the packing is good. I'm going to turn it to the outmost position, the inmost position. I might have to tighten the nut just a little bit and reevaluate if there's a leak. The control response is good. We see some orange and some artifacts because this is an older fuel that I'm testing with. We'll set some water to boil on the burner. We can also have a better look at the flame covered by the pot. The pattern looks very nice. And it doesn't take long at all for the water to boil. With the water boiling, we'll fire up the auxiliary burner. We will have to supply more fuel for this, of course. And we can see no problem maintaining the full blast of the main burner, the auxiliary burner, and still boil water. This stove is working in top condition. We could shut it down. You'll notice as I close the auxiliary burner, the flame on the main burner goes way up. We'll shut the main fuel valve to close the main burner now. And there'll be a residual blue ring for up to a minute or so as the gas in the system slowly burns off. After it cools down, if it's going back to storage like this one is, the fuel's going to need to be removed completely. I use a coffee filter in my funnel so I don't introduce any contaminants into the can. The shape is designed such that you're never going to be able to pour all of it out. You could shake as much as you want. We can see the filter did catch contaminants. I've rolled up a piece of paper towel that I'm sticking into the tank and positioning the tank such that all the residual fuel will flow to the paper towel. I'll then let it air dry for a while and then put the cap back on. So I hope you enjoyed this video on the teardown, maintenance, and rebuild on this E variant of the Coleman 425 double burner stove. I hope you found it insightful, entertaining, and informative. Hit that like button down below, helps me out a lot when you do. And hit that subscribe button for notifications when more videos like this come out. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Would you like to reply?